Welcome to El Paso Opera's panel discussion about the opera industry. I'm Cherry Duke, Artistic Associate with El Paso Opera and the Director of Opera at the University of Texas at El Paso. Tonight's discussion is the second event in our new annual Giving Voice series.
Thanks, Cherry. I'm sorry, I think you may have muted yourself.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Tonight's discussion is the second event in our new annual Giving Voice series and the first time we have used this particular platform. So our apologies for any technical bumps that we may experience along the way. What is Giving Voice? Giving Voice is El Paso Opera's new annual series, amplifying Latinx opera singers and artists locally and nationally. This series is our official response to the August 3rd, 2019 Walmart tragedy and is aligned with our commitment to promoting or giving voice to traditionally underrepresented, marginalized communities, especially in the performing arts, especially in opera, and especially in terms of Latinx people. Every year, we plan to invite an honored headlining Latinx artist to be in residence for a week of events, including an industry panel discussion, student masterclasses with UTEP voice students, a joint concert with Opera UTEP, and a main event, El Paso Opera Recital. I am so happy tonight to be joined by this distinguished panel of artists, all of whom hail from our region. First, our headlining artist, Luis Alejandro Orozco. He is a homegrown Mexican-American baritone. Since living and training in El Paso, Luis has cultivated an accomplished opera career of impressive engagements with such companies as Fort Worth Opera, Arizona Opera, Cincinnati Opera, Opera Williamsburg, Opera Santa Barbara, Florentine Opera, Anchorage Opera, San Diego Opera, Michigan Opera Theater, Austin Lyric Opera, Opera Theater of St. Louis, Florida Grand Opera, and Washington National Opera, among many others. Luis is also known as the leading interpreter in the United States for the role of El Payador in Piazzolla's Maria de Buenos Aires. He'll be performing his Giving Voice recital for us all on Sunday at 2:30 here on YouTube Live, which includes some all-time beloved Spanish language music. Welcome, Luis. Great to see you again.
Thank you. Great being here.
Next is a face that I'm sure all of you will recognize. Ricardo Herrera is a bass baritone who has performed around the USA, Europe, and China, including San Francisco Opera, Gotham Opera, Cincinnati Opera, New York Festival of Song, Bel Canto Opera at Caramore, Chicago Opera Theater, Oldenburgische Stadttheater, and Nanjing, China. Ricardo is a graduate from UTEP and the Juilliard School and is now an associate professor of voice at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. He attended the Daniel Ferro vocal program in Italy as a student and is now an invited faculty member, continuing Maestro Ferro's legacy. Ricardo is a member of the Coaching 360 workshop in New York City and a founder of Hair Vocalis, a vocal program in Chihuahua City, Mexico. Hi, Ricardo. Welcome.
Thank you, Cherry. Very good to see you again.
Great to see you too. Miss Stephanie Sanchez is a mezzo-soprano who is quickly creating a name for herself as an exciting young mezzo-soprano on the rise. Stephanie joined Opera San Jose for their 2019-20 season as a resident principal artist, where she sang the roles of Prince Orlovsky in Die Fledermaus and Hansel in Hansel and Gretel, among others. She joined Arizona Opera as a Marion Pullen studio artist for the 2017-18 season. She has performed with Arizona Opera, Opera Theater of St. Louis, the Glimmerglass Festival, St. Petersburg Opera, and several others. Stephanie completed her artist diploma from the Shepherd School of Music at Rice University and a master's degree in vocal performance from New Mexico State University in Las Cruces, where she was born and raised. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, Cherry. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Now, I know all of you may know our final panelist, El Paso Opera's artistic director, Justin Lucero. Justin is a stage director and professor of directing at Carnegie Mellon University School of Drama, one of the foremost conservatories in the world. His life in El Paso has shaped his artistic outlook and aesthetic, which are evident in his creative research and freelance work around the country. For El Paso Opera, he has staged Pagliacci, The Magic Flute, Hansel and Gretel, and others, and will be staging Bon Appetit later this season, as well as next season's Frida. Hi, Justin, welcome.
I'm so glad to be here. I'm so excited for all of you to be here. Thank you.
Thank you all. I'm looking forward to our discussion. But first, we at El Paso Opera would like to acknowledge the land on which this is all occurring. El Paso Opera operates in the ancestral homeland of the Chiricahua Apache, Mescalero Apache, Jumano, Manso, Piro, and Suma peoples, of whom many of the mestizo inhabitants of Ciudad Juarez and El Paso are bloodline descendants, and the current home of the displaced Tiwa peoples, the only distinct native group remaining in what is now known as El Paso. We at El Paso Opera pay respect and gratitude to all native peoples, past, present, and future, and their continuing presence in the homeland and throughout the indigenous diaspora who continue to act as stewards of the land. We encourage you, our audience, to learn more about these vibrant communities among us and to remember that the land that surrounds us is part of who we are and reflects our histories. Thank you. And now, let's get to some questions. Okay, anyone who wants to answer, you just jump right in. How has your connection with the El Paso area influenced your artistry and career? Go
okay,
ahead.
I can go first.
Sure.
I think it's kind of unavoidable when you grow up with both cultures. I think it really does become such an integral part of who you are, not only as an artist, just as a person in general. There's kind of a running, I don't know if it's a joke, but it's a very relatable thing that when you go to Mexico and you're from the border towns, they can pick out right away that you're not, from Mexico. And then in the States, they can pick out right away that you're not from the States. So you're kind of in this no man's land, and it becomes a very bonding, I think, experience for people from the border towns and just from the Southwest of the United States. But I think as far as how it's informed my artistry, it just as simple as that, just as simple as bringing my culture and both of my cultures into the way I approach a character, the way I walk into a room. We're just much more communal people, I think, than we give ourselves credit for. And I think in a rehearsal process, in a rehearsal period, that's one of my favorite things, just to be a part of a community. So I would say that's kind of how it's influenced me the most.
I think, if I may say, we are very fortunate to belong to this community and to bring our culture everywhere we go. And it could be the next town in the state of Texas, or it could be all across the world. We are very fortunate to be the ambassadors of this culture. I spent a semester last year in Spain, and even in that country where you speak the language, being from this area, it's a very significant legacy. It's a very significant matter because you bring both cultures together. You, as a Hispanic Latino living and growing up in this border town, you have faced the struggles on both sides, and you have faced the struggles, and you have lived the struggles with your families. So we're not simple people in a way of simple-minded. We're warriors. We really drive through, and we want to make it happen. I think that's something that we can proudly say. And when we are invited to a performance, when we're cast and we are given a certain role or the lead role, it's an honor. And I think we bring that honor with pride, knowing that we can share a lot of things to the new world, the people around us, the new community that we face. They will learn a lot from us because we bring our families, we bring our neighbors, we bring the helping hand, we bring the teachers, we bring everybody that built us together, we bring them to them. And I think we should be, I'm very proud of doing that.
Actually, sorry, Stephanie, I just want to respond already because what Ricardo was saying is so amazing.
I know, I was so moved by it.
Ricardo, you brought up the word struggle. And what's interesting is that someone that was also, raised and grew up in El Paso, one of the interesting things about it that has influenced me in my career is as soon as I left El Paso, I fell more in love with El Paso than when I was there. It's really interesting. A lot of us feel what it's like to be like ready to, see something beyond El Paso. And then you leave and you really do realize how special it is. And on the other hand, El Paso is just so family oriented, and it's so, community driven, and you feel, even though you're in a huge city, you feel like you're in a small town. Everybody says so. But we have the, I guess, luxury of living in a majority minority area. And so when you do leave El Paso, for some of us, I know for me specifically, I'll speak from the I, it was a wake up call where I finally realized that I am technically different. I am an other. And that totally has affected the way I approach my art, because in places that are not El Paso, I am the first maybe Latinx artist that someone has collaborated with, and that's both an honor and a little bit of a load, a weight to have to carry.
I think it's a big responsibility.
Yeah.
I mean, being out in the performing circuit, like, I really enjoy being able to talk to others about our culturally rich and diverse home, because our upbringing, it is so special and it's so unique, especially within the setting of a very whitewashed art form like opera. So I'm very, very proud of my upbringing. It kind of reminded me of a quick story. I actually met Luis at Opera Theater of St. Louis. I didn't meet him in El Paso. And I remember getting a Facebook message from him asking me, "Stephanie, are you from El Chuco?" And it just literally made my day. And like right then and there, we had this bond. There was this unspoken bond and connection, knowing that we both grew up and lived in the borderland.
That's fantastic. Well, Justin, I know that you at Carnegie Mellon, you talked about being perceived as an other. It seems to me that immediately you were put to work because of your otherness with a special responsibility. Do you want to speak to that?
Sure. Over the summer, because of both the pandemic and all of the revived racial justice conversations nationwide, the School of Drama, where I teach at Carnegie Mellon, has
in Pittsburgh. For those of you who don't know,
yes, I'm in Pittsburgh right now, 2 hours ahead, so past my bedtime. Just kidding. No, we took it upon ourselves to really dig deeply and see what our responsibility is as a learning institution, a training institution, to grooming the next generation of artists that go out into the world, and how they interact with each other and society. And so we are committing ourselves to really dig deeply and work deeply in what it is to confront issues of racism or bias in the arts, and the stories that we tell. And because I am, someone who is not a Caucasian faculty member, one of the very few actually, I've been asked to, be one of the people that helps organize these changes and these initiatives. And it's been a lot of work, but it's also been really exciting to see people respond and to see people feel excited that someone like me is bringing a perspective into training and ultimately into the industry. I teach in the theater world as well as the opera world, and so I'm really excited that institutions like mine and programs all around the country this semester have really doubled down and committed to embedding that.
Yeah, that's really good news.
Something struck me as you were talking about El Paso and leaving El Paso and what it felt like. It's interesting. It's interesting that we're from a place that's majorly Hispanic, and there are a lot of things that I was completely unaware of. Not ever living. I lived in Juarez, and then I lived in El Paso, so not ever living outside of that realm until my mid-20s. Moving to Cincinnati and moving to Cincinnati in a time when Cincinnati was in the middle of racial reconciliation, I guess is the best way to say it. They had just kind of come off like 2 years prior. They had race riots. And when I moved to Cincinnati, the city was really making a push to talk as a community, to talk with law enforcement, to talk with each other, to talk with activists on how to move forward. And in a way, I now looking back, Cincinnati was kind of ahead of where a lot of cities are right now. And they've done a lot of that work already, and they're still doing that work. It's not nowhere near finished, and they're still having their struggles, and but they have built this platform to kind of work on them. But anyway, that's all to say that when I showed up to Cincinnati, I was completely oblivious to anything that was outside of, and it was a huge shock for me. I just had nothing to compare it to. So I would say that Cincinnati also shaped my path of where I went after El Paso, and also made me fall in love and appreciate El Paso more than I did before I left it.
I want to just add something to what Luis is saying. Something like that happened to me when I left El Paso for New York. It was such a big change. El Paso, New York.
Yeah.
It's another world. But I had never experienced that type of oppression against colors, against faiths. In El Paso, I think at that time we were very fortunate that we just went. I had friends of all colors and of all faiths. We didn't think twice about it. We just were peers, and we played together, and we sang together, and that's it. The first few weeks in New York, I noticed that apprehension, that cautiousness of, where are you from? Where is he from? Why is that lady looking at me like that? There's always this nervousness because of the way they look, because of the way they present themselves with their attires or their skin. And I realized how difficult some of these people have had their lives. The Jewish people, my Jewish friends, were telling me all these stories that I could not believe, but they were very, very real. They lived them, and they still live them today. I realized that for the first time when I went to New York City. I guess I was in a bubble, in a sort of beautiful bubble here where I got along with people, and nobody shared those kinds of stories with me. And then I have my Black friends saying the same things. Yeah. And then I had my other kinds of friends, from China, from everywhere. And they said, well, we experienced this here, so that's why we become nervous about it. Aren't you nervous about it? I thought maybe I should be. I don't know. But it was a big realization, and that made me understand a lot about the world and a lot about the need for reconciliation and for healing. So even then in New York City, they were still already building up, communities to heal these processes. But I was shocked, like you were saying, Luis, when you went to Cincinnati. For me, New York City was a big wake-up call.
Yeah. We have a question from someone who's watching on YouTube. Melissa wants to know, have you ever dealt with racism in academia? If so, how have you approached these situations, Justin and Ricardo, or perhaps even Stephanie and Luis, when you were in school, not just as a faculty member, but
Let me tell you
as a
one
student?
quick funny story. I haven't really felt it in academia, meaning from my colleagues. I haven't. It's been I've been fortunate that we have a very good team, and it's a balanced team, and we support each other. And I think that's why when we have students of all backgrounds, we support them, because the faculty is like that. But friends of faculty or friends of friends, will come and show up and meet us. And I have a cute story from the question that you're saying, what do you do about it? Well, there was one person who met me in the street, and she looked at me from afar. We were just crossing little by little, and they said, oh, well, this is Ricardo Herrera. He's in the faculty. Oh, hello, nice to meet you, nice to meet you. And she waved back to me, and she said, how long have you been in this country? And I said, well, pretty much all my life. And that's it. That was the answer. And she just smiled, said, oh, great. And they just kept on going. I think if you allow the insult or the intent of an insult or any kind of hint trying to, take away your peace, if you allow that, it will happen. But if you don't, if you just answer the question, if you don't allow that person to come to that, to that part of you that might be defensive, I think things can end there. And I felt funny when that person tried to say something like that, like, what are you doing here? What kind of, do you belong here? Kind of a question. It didn't really affect me, but I kept that story, I guess, for today. Now I can tell the story.
Yeah.
I think it's something that you learn how to deal with. I didn't really have any issues with racially insensitive comments in academia, but definitely in work situations with different opera companies. And I think the first time that I was told something that was questionable or inappropriate, I kind of laughed it off nervously, oh, yeah, okay. And then it happens to you again. And then you learn how to handle it in a diplomatic and almost educational way, because most of these comments and these questions, they come from ignorance, right? And you have to learn, and you learn how to handle it, because it wasn't innate for me. It's something that I had to practice, basically.
I think we just have such, years and years and years of tradition, whatever that word is, that we are contending with. It is, for some people, they look at the opera repertoire, the canon, the great classics, and they didn't see people that weren't, I guess, Europeans performing those. So it's difficult to see that option, right? And as it became more and more acceptable, it now becomes the question where we are now of, when do I embrace the fact that you are of a particular cultural heritage when confronting your art? Because at one point, right, we were trying to be colorblind, and we were trying to say, I don't see color, and everyone's the same. But the fact of the matter is, we aren't the same, and that's somewhat erasing our experience. There's something rich about our experience that we can bring to our art. I don't need to take it away from myself so that we can all be the same. It's our differences that are making us unique, and that we can bring to the art form and to audiences and to the national conversation.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think like Stephanie, I've never experienced, I was very fortunate in Cincinnati. I went to school there after El Paso, and I was embraced by a very wonderful faculty and community of students. It wasn't until work, and a lot of times they're very small, they're very slight, and sometimes you don't really pick up on them.
Yeah, they're microaggressions, right?
Yeah, and then you leave. It's just the case that we work in a donor-based arts industry in the United States. And when you get into a home of a donor, they could be from all different walks of life. And this is not to say anything negative about a donor-based industry, because I've had wonderful relationships with donors, and several have been in my wedding, several went to my wedding, but there have been occasions where that's happened in a rehearsal room, in a donor party, and it's you kind of just, like Stephanie said, you just learn to kind of deal with it, laugh it off, or just handle it as it comes. But it is very interesting when they're so slight sometimes that it takes you a little while to catch on to it.
Well, that brings us to the question of, how do you perceive the state of our industry, inclusive of professional companies and training institutions, in terms of representation and inclusion for Latino, Latinx people? As you said, Luis, donors can often say stuff that can rub people the wrong way. And as Stephanie said, it often comes from just not really being aware. So what is our responsibility going forward? How do you all see the change that is needed, or do you see a change that is needed, and how should it manifest?
Well, there's always room for improvement, right? Some companies I've found are definitely better than others, and there seem to be a lot that are moving in the right direction. Pre-pandemic, there were several times I would show up for a job and I'm the only person of color in the room, and that's last year, that's 2019. But with everything that's happened over the past year, there seems to be a real push for racial equality in every job sector, not just in the arts. And I'm choosing to be hopeful that things will change. I know that some opera companies are hiring a diversity inclusion task force. I know other people are trying to create initiatives specifically for people of color. And that's a start. That's a really, really great start. As being the biggest minority in the entire country, why shouldn't there be more of us everywhere?
I think the change is happening. I've had the fortunate to work with different companies where they schedule operas of Latinx themes. One recent example, of course, is the opera Frida, that was composed by Robert Xavier Rodriguez, a Mexican-American composer. And it's so well received that everybody wants to do it now. And they're not afraid of the Latinx theme. Actually, they're embracing it fully and righteously, because it's very good for the industry to be doing these kinds of projects. It's also happening in academia. For example, at U of I, we are making plans. We're devising curricula so that we can incorporate classes where we focus on Latinx composers, Latinx projects, recitals of music like that. Not just random, like once in a while we'll sing Maria Grever's song. It's a focused recital. It's a focused curriculum that we can explore and teach the new generations. And just like us, there's many institutions doing the same thing. So I think the change is happening, and I'm glad to see that change. I think our generation, and maybe a few years later too, planted that seed, and now it's time to make it grow and to really water it and make sure that it doesn't dry out, because it's picking up momentum. It's really moving forward, and I'm really happy to see that.
And I think one of the reasons it's picking up momentum is that people, as they're being more and more exposed to cultural difference and inclusion and representation, this is what I tell my students of directing. Actually, the more specific you are, the more universal it becomes. We try so hard to make something applicable or universal to everyone in the audience. But the fact of the matter is, if I tell a story about a Latino family, and they're working to have a great life, who doesn't that apply to? That's everybody. It just so happens to be through the lens of a particular cultural heritage, for example. But you actually end up seeing more of yourself, no matter what background you have, when you're looking really focused into a particular story or a particular storyline. I really, Frida, as you can tell, that example is something that I'm so excited to bring to our community. The music, the inspiration, obviously, the figures behind the piece. I just know that people are going to embrace it here.
Yeah, that's very exciting.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, like Ricardo said, change is coming. Change is always slow, and important change specifically tends to be on the slower side. And I think we're at a cross points right now. We're at a crossroads where things can head in the right direction. And I think enough people are raising their voice to make a push for things to go in that direction. I love the push for more Latinx works. I think as far as just the Latino community in the opera art form, we are massively underrepresented. And we're, like you said, it's a European art form, and I think it's been tough for the Latino community to really break into it fully. I do love that we are heading towards Latinx works being staples of the repertoire. Things like Florencia, things like Frida, a lot of these
Maria de
works.
Buenos Aires.
Yeah, absolutely. Things that deserve to be in the repertoire. The issue becomes when Latinx performers are only given the opportunities to perform in these right now it's like a handful of works that are being done. So when Latinx performers are being given the opportunities of just doing those works specifically, it becomes a really unsustainable way for Latino artists to make a full-time living when they've been trained to sing Mozart, when they've been trained to sing Puccini, Verdi, you name it. When you're not getting the standard repertoire calls, it's the same thing that happens to our colleagues that are African American that get tapped for Porgy and Bess constantly, and perhaps don't get the opportunity to sing a Count, to sing a Susanna, to sing, you know, things that are going to put them in the national or international spotlight in a sense, because unfortunately, how our industry works right now is the bulk of the work is standard repertoire. And I do think that we're at a crossroads where you're starting to see more contemporary repertoire, period, you know, in English and Spanish and all kinds of languages all around the world. I mean, Germany has their fair share of standard repertoire of contemporary repertoire that's popped up all over the place. And I think that will become more and more available to the art forms all across the world. So I'm excited for that. I'm excited to see more Latinx works represented. And I think we're starting to see it. We're starting to get more, like Bel Canto premiered in Chicago, which was in English, but it was by a Peruvian composer. And it was very well received. So I think we're heading in the right direction, but you know, like all important change, it tends to be on the slower side.
Yeah, I think this is where it comes, I guess, also our responsibility, not to continue for a little bit and then dip down, but to encourage us who are already in this field, to encourage the next generation of composers, the next generations of playwrights, and tell them, come on, this is your day. Do it now. Don't wait anymore. Don't wait. Don't stay asleep. You have to produce. You have to start putting yourself there, so that in a few years we have a vast community. We have an enough repertoire so that people can start recognizing this repertoire. And also, and I think you're right, Luis. And also, when you go into a company, audition for other things and keep showing up that you can do your Counts and your Darlinas and your Rosinas and all that. Keep showing up and saying those things. And I think the relationship can continue to build up, because our responsibility is not just settling. I think it's really encouraging everybody else, ourselves, but also the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend who has a rule of thumb that he says for every Porgy and Bess that he sings, he also gets a regular canon opera. Mm-hmm. So he makes sure that if he's singing, he does sport and lives all over the place. And so he goes to sing a sport and life. He makes sure that he talks to the company about the following season and what they can schedule him in for the standard canon, for the standard repertoire. And I think that's an important lesson to keep in mind, especially with the new emergence of the Latinx operas coming up, because I'm all for them, but I also want to sing the standard rep as well.
Yeah.
May I ask for this standard rep question? Is it because, how do I put this? Do we want to be seen as just a singer? Or is it at the point now that you want to be seen as a Latinx singer who can also do the role? I think Luis and I had a conversation earlier about, what was it, Figaro? And,
mm-hmm.
The fact that, these are roles that are for quote unquote servants, and what does it mean to then cast, a minority, or let's specifically a Latina or something as the maid? Is that good? Is that bad? What is it? Those are the kinds of things that when I cast, I'm ultra aware of. We did Pagliacci, recently, and that's a tough show. And because there's violence in a relationship, and there are other things that, what does it mean for me to just cast, the person who is abusive as a particular racial or ethnic character? What am I saying in that way? Or the villain is the only person of color in the cast, or those questions I'm ultra aware of, but not all of us are yet. What are your experiences with that, or how do you cope with that question of your identity informing the role?
I think part of my identity as an artist is I will never not be Mexican American. I will never not have that experience, and it's always going to be a part of me. I think part of me does want to be seen as a singer that can, that can go toe to toe and audition for a role. And if I'm the best person for the job, then great. If I'm not, then also great. And I think there is an aspect of just wanting the shot to compete for those things on an equal footing. And yeah, like that was actually a great conversation that you and I had about Figaro and Susanna when does it become tricky to cast minorities as the servants? And I actually don't see it that way. And especially the way that show is written, Mozart elevates those two characters to the same footing as everybody else in that cast, in that group of people, to show the equality of everybody's intellect, of everybody's emotional abilities, of everybody's emotional intelligence. And it's a show about class, and it's a show about the different classes, and really kind of comparing and humanizing what one class may not see in the other. And I think that's an important story to tell. Just as important as it is to have more Latinx works, I think it's important to tell Marriage of Figaro through a diverse cast. I think something as simple as Bohème can actually flourish through a cast that's diverse.
I agree. I'm also myself every day, every night, every morning, but I like to think that I can transform myself on stage and become whatever the book is telling me to do. If it's a king, if it's a servant, or a butterfly, or whatever the character might be in the L'Enfant, a tree. I think I played the tree in that.
I played a chair, Ricardo.
Right.
A chair.
Whatever that book is telling me to do, I am happy, and I'm going to try my best to transform myself into that and give it life, with my voice and with my training, because everybody else is doing the same thing. They're trying to do the best they can. and they respect you for trying that. And the audience also knows that you're not Figaro. They know that you're not a butterfly or a chair. You're pretending. And they love it when you try your best and you portray the character and you live it for 2 hours. Then afterwards you come and you say, and yes, I am Mexican American, and I trained, and I have discipline, and I love this art form, and I'm going to pass out this to the next generation. And they love you for that. So they love you at both instances. And I think that's one way for you to transform the industry, by accepting what the book is telling you and do justice to it, and then speaking to the donors, and then speaking to the audience, and then doing masterclasses like Luis gave a masterclass earlier today, and talk to the next generation and say, this is what you need to ask. You need to ask about this. You cannot just be complacent and say, I got it. I know the notes and I know the rhythms. I'm ready to go. You have to keep digging. You have to keep trying. And that will make a difference, I think, over the course of time.
Yeah.
Well, something that I know has been on our minds is, and that we didn't get to pay not tribute. We didn't get to recognize the way we intended this year because of the COVID-19 situation, but we want to talk about how the Walmart tragedy affected you specifically as an opera artist.
So I remember getting the news, and I was away on a job, and my heart immediately sank, and I cried, and I started to reach out to friends and family that lived in El Paso just to make sure that they were okay. It's very personal for me, as it is for everybody else that's here that's involved in this discussion. I lived on the east side. That was the Walmart that I went to. And I was angry because I felt like there weren't enough people around me that were talking about it. Mm-hmm. And that really bothered me. Like I said, I was on a job and none of my colleagues asked about it. And it was just, it was very strange to me. So I needed a lot of time to process what had happened. And I truthfully don't know if I ever really processed it fully. Because how do you process such a hateful and heinous crime against our people? And so I would be lying if I said that I wanted to make and create art as a response. That was not one of those instances. I didn't want to sing a note. And truthfully, I think that's okay because we process trauma differently, I don't know that I ever really felt, whole again after hearing about it.
I was visiting Juarez at that time, and I was actually on the line of the bridge crossing El Paso into El Paso when I got a text message from my friends, and they said, if you're in El Paso, be aware of this. Please get away from that Walmart. And I'm there on the line of the bridge, and then more messages start to pour into my cell phone. I think the first thing that comes to my mind is not really, like Stephanie says, not really the art form, the beautiful things that we do in with our art, with our voices, but the people, the friends, my friends, are they relatives of my relatives? Are they relatives of my friends or of my ex-students or my colleagues? Are they being involved in that? Is anybody losing a friend or a family member? And I wanted to go and help. How? I don't know. You just want to go help, but you're kind of tied to that moment. There were some connections. In the end, I found out there were some connections to the victims. And then you just want to come and comfort them. And my way of comforting them is by speaking and by singing. That's my instrument. So I do want to come in and do that. And I wanted to come and sing for them. I still do. I still want to do over and over until we heal that wound as much as possible. I think this is the problem with that we're having right now in our country, that we jump, I think, too soon into the treatment of the disease, but we have to stabilize it first. We have to come and comfort people, because it's not a simple thing to just all of a sudden my uncle is gone or my niece. I had her this morning and now she's not there because of this tragic event. You need to comfort these people and give them hope. And us as singers, I think we have this power. And I say it from my heart. When we sing, we have a special power because we connect with the most sensitive areas of the listener. and then you can calm things down, and then you can bring them back to hope. And then you can make a plan, and then you protect yourselves, and then you can expand that protection to other communities. That was my transformation on that. I'm sorry that nobody cared for it, Stephanie, when you were. That's really horrible. But what can you do? What can you do at that moment? You're tied up with your hands, and you just want to go in comfort. I think that was my reaction to them.
Yeah, I think we kept talking about El Paso as a bubble and as a wonderful bubble, and that was the first time I ever felt like the bubble had been popped, and it wasn't impervious to things that I had seen outside and had lived through in New York City and Cincinnati or in other places that I had been. And I think it was a heinous act intended to quiet down a community, intended, just like a lot of the acts that have happened in the past 4 years have been intended to quiet down certain parts of a community or certain groups of people. This was a heinous act intended to quiet the Hispanic community in the United States down. And I think I felt angry, and I felt it a responsibility to do the opposite. I found it a responsibility to be louder, to speak up more about the things that bothered me, to speak up more for other people. And if I take any comfort through it, is that I know the community, and we all know the community, and we all know how strong that community is. And there was never a doubt in my mind that the community was going to get up and they were going to get through it. What my hope was, and I don't know if anybody else had this experience, we immigrated to the States, and I think our parents, or my parents at least, we kind of came into the States not wanting to rattle too many things, not wanting to be too loud, not wanting to we came in trying to fit in. And I think for me that all stopped a while ago, but if anything, something like this just completely pops into that bubble, and I just can't go back. I can't go back to not speaking up, to not being an active and loud part of our society. And whether that's inside and outside of music. But it was an eye-opening experience, because it was the first time I had something so visceral and so tangible that I was like, well, I can't go back.
And that's how this came to be. Well, our gathering right now, right? Giving voice. That was the idea. If this event was meant to try and silence a community, we're not going to be silenced. In fact, we're going to amplify. The effect of me as a stage director was just outside of El Paso. It becoming clear that when I or people who look like the people in my family or in my community stand up in front of someone, perform in front of someone, run a rehearsal room in front of someone, there are people who look at you and want you not to be there. And that event really made me realize that really clearly. And so it's our job to continue to positively represent and reflect who we really are, and that there is nothing to hate or to fear about us. And so we just will keep doing what we're doing, but even louder, like Luis was saying, and just be the change that we want reflected in the society, and show people out there that that we are just like them, and we deserve to be here just like they do.
Hear, hear.
We've talked a lot about our industry and where it fits into our new, well, I don't want to say new ideas, but the racial justice issues that are in the world. Why opera? Why opera as your medium?
I remember when I was finishing high school, and that was the same question that Princess Lofton asked me the first time I had a lesson with him. And I actually asked him back, I don't know, why opera? Because I have no idea. And then he starts describing it to me, because at that time I did not know enough about it, not at all. Now I have it very clear. It's a super powerful art form. It's not a 50%, 60%, a little dose of this. No, it's the full powerful combination of art form. You train like an athlete. You are on the edge of making mistakes at all times, and you're still struggling, with the notes, with the rhythms, with the going stage right or stage left. Oh, sorry, the prop. Oh, I forgot that jar. It's on the other side. You have to drum back, and then
And a foreign language.
And a foreign language.
Usually.
And then you have to do your little dance, and then you have to learn your tango in Maria de Buenos Aires, and then you have to
in a corset.
Yeah, and then you carry the soprano, and you have a cape, and you stumble on the cape. Plus,
Cherry, have you seen Ricardo in a corset? What do I not know?
It's a little secret.
You didn't see my Escamillo in a corset? No.
Oh.
So, musically, you're so prepared. You have to really know what you're doing. It's not really, you cannot just show up, to a rehearsal of Bohem and just no. You have to study it. You really have to know it. Then you deal with a subject. Then you deal with struggling students who are trying to live their lives, and then trying to save each other's from disease or from poverty, and they want to enjoy life one more day. And then you deal with treason, and then you deal with love and the death of a parent or a death of a child. This is life. This is exactly what life is about. You express it, and you're able to fulfill the audience with those emotions so that they have a chance to heal also if they experience that, or to prepare themselves for that when that happens. I think this is why theater, I think this is why music, but I think this is why opera together. It happens in opera together in its full majestic form.
Stephanie, Justin?
I think just like Ricardo said, for me, it was the first time I ever experienced music as a full form of expression, a full form of human expression. And I've never, these are things that you've heard in millions of songs, like the words are words that you've heard before. But this is a new way of saying something. This is a new way of expressing something with not just a text, but a full other harmonic language that makes everything just so much more rich for it. And for me, I just never fall in love with music the way I fell in love with opera. I live, eat, and breathe it. Whether I sing it for the rest of my life or not, it's become a part of who I am, of how I express myself, how I express just emotions generally. I think Ricardo put it beautifully. It's a full form expression on stage, and it's everything combined. And I had just never experienced anything like it.
Just to add on to what Luis and Ricardo have already said, I grew up in a very musical family, and music was always around. My dad had a band in the region that played everything from George Strait to Tigres del Norte, and so I was always involved in music in some way or another. And so I did piano, and I did dance, and I did choir, and I wasn't exposed to opera until I got into college. And I saw my first show, and as corny and as cheesy as it sounds, I saw it and I was hooked. Opera is every art form rolled into one. The costumes, the sets, the orchestra, and above all, for me, it's that power of the human voice. You know, it's like nothing else.
And of course, I'm the stage director, right? I'm not the performer. And what draws me to the art form is that it's a shared experience, that there is a group of people gathered together and another group of people gathered together to be a storyteller and a story receiver. And I think it's just so powerful that we are all together sharing experience, and that in this particular art form, it's so biologically, crudely beautiful because it is about breath and voice. And, you know, that's the first thing we do when we enter this world is we expel breath and voice. And it's just so tied to our emotion. And so when we put everybody in a room together, hopefully one day soon, it is so wonderful. And so that's why I keep coming back to live performing arts. And I'm so glad that you all share with me often. So thank you.
Thank you all. We're coming up on the end of our hour together. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that we might not have done this if it weren't for the terrible pandemic. So, you know, there are blessings to be found even amidst tragedy, even amidst hardship. And I'm very grateful to all of you for being here. Yes, Ariane, we all can't wait till we can be together again. And thank you to everybody who has watched us on YouTube. I have a few announcements before we close today. We hope that you'll join us again on YouTube Live for the Giving Voice main event featuring this guy, Luis, and pianist Michael Lewis, performing from Skorka Hall at the National Opera Center in New York City. Pay What You Can access is still available at epopera.org for this Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Go to epopera.org for your tickets. Pay what you can. We just want you to come. And Luis joins my group, Opera UTEP, on Tuesday evening at 7:30 p.m. for a free Facebook Live Giving Voice concert, where he will perform along with my students in an all-Spanish program celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. Lastly, please allow me to plug that UTEP and the El Paso Border Folk Festival is having a free Zoom concert tomorrow evening featuring the winners of this year's exciting Canto del Norte competition. The link is available on the UTEP Voice Area Facebook page and the Facebook event for the Canto del Norte competition for you to tune in tomorrow night, October 10th at 7:30 p.m. on Zoom. And you may know this year's first place winner, El Paso Opera resident artist and office manager and a graduate student of mine, mezzo-soprano Mariana Sandoval, first place in the adult division. I'm so proud of her. Thank you all again for this stimulating conversation. I look forward to many more with you, with all artists of all colors, and may the discussion continue.
Thanks, everybody. I'm so glad to have done this. Thank you, Cherry.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank
Goodbye.
you. Good night.
Good night.